All right, we want to talk about holding a pastor's luncheon. I don't know when we started doing this. I can't remember when we started doing it. But I know we were doing it back at least 10 years ago. I remember one in Indianapolis that we held there. I guess we started doing them in 94. 93, 94, because I remember one held in Reese. We held one there in Reese, and that was, I think, 1994 when that church was planted, because I had a stroke. We had 2 church plants, one in Leonard, which is just east of here. Brother Roland, that's where I'm trying to get Brother Campbell to get in touch with you. He's coming back from Jamaica to speak there tomorrow night for them. I know they'd like to meet you. What happened was, I got up to preach. The week before, I'd done a family camp over in Wisconsin. Drove over here on Saturday, got here Sunday. Sunday morning, I woke up. I had a little bit of, thank you very much, a little bit of blurred vision in my eye and didn't think too much about it. And so we were starting Sunday night for these meetings in Leonard, and then I was going to Canada, coming back and doing the Reese meetings. And so Sunday night, just before preaching, I lost my vision in my left eye. It just was gone. I sat down beside the pastor's wife, who was a nurse, and I said, look, I got a problem. I can't see out of my left eye. I could see fine out of my right eye. And she took my pulse and she said, seems to be fine. And as I'm sitting there, this thing just sort of goes right out the top. I'll never forget it. It just sort of right out the top of my eye. My vision came back. And I said, I can see again. And so she said, well, you know, this could be serious. And so I went to the pastor, her husband, and I said, look, I told him what happened. And he said, well, I didn't bring a message. So I went to the new pastor. He was standing there. He said, well, I didn't bring a message either. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll preach. But your wife said if something happens, I'm immediately to go to the emergency room. We had about 200 people in the service. Their church was there. It was a big crowd. It was exciting. And so I come up, I'm sitting on the platform, and my daughter, Susanna, she's sitting on the front row, and she's going, Dad, how many fingers am I holding up? She's wondering if I can see. I didn't have a problem, preached that night, and nobody else knew, just my family, the pastors knew, and so on. Now, you got to be a bad preacher to have a stroke and preach and nobody tell the difference, you know? So anyway, what happened was I went ahead and did this meeting. I went to the doctor the next day. They checked for a detached retina. They couldn't find anything. He said, you need to go home and get it checked out. I went to Canada, did a seminar, came back. The Reese Church was started. And then I went home and they found a hole in my heart. And a blood clot had gone through the hole to my brain is what had happened. And that particular night. And I guess it had started that morning when it was fuzzy. I didn't know it, but then I just thought that was tired, and then it went into the brain, caused the blockage in vision, and then I don't know what happened to it. So they decided to do open heart surgery, and then they said, well, let's do one more check. They checked and said, you know, that hole is awfully small. I think we're just going to put you on an aspirin. And so they did that, and I said to the doctor, now, if this happens again, what should I do? He said, you call 911. He said, you do not understand how good God was to you in this. And never had a problem for years. And my wife is not in this session, so I can say this. I think I was just tired, you know, working in the office, and my vision was just not real clear. I've had it since then. And I said something to her, and she said, you're going to the emergency room. I said, no, I'm not. She said, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm not. So she calls the doctor, and he said, yes, you are. And so I ended up going to the emergency room, and they didn't find anything, but they started doing some tests. And so my doctor said, I think it's okay, but I'm going to send it to a heart specialist. Sent it to him. The heart specialist said, get him back. So I had to come off the road, put me on Coumadin, and 18 months later they went in and put a umbrella through the hole. 94 they were going to do open heart surgery. This time they went up through my leg. I watched it. They went up through my leg with this thing, put this little umbrella through the hole, flipped something, closed it, and then pulled the little thing back out. 4 hours later, I walked out of the hospital, went home. And it was amazing to what they could do. But I do remember that luncheon that we held up in Reese. We held it at a little, I don't know what it was, some little restaurant up there. A bunch of preachers came to it. But the luncheon is really, really important to hold. The Get Acquainted meetings are very important for a successful beginning of a new church. And these helping churches are vital for the success of the Get Acquainted meetings. So we want the Get Acquainted meetings to be successful. And in order for them to be successful, we've got to have a luncheon to help churches understand what they're to do during the Get Acquainted meetings. And a pastor's luncheon or breakfast will help inform pastors about the church plant. Will help them to understand what they're supposed to do. Now, this meeting will ensure that each church understands their role in the church plant. There is an appendix with this in it. I don't know where it is. Back here someplace. Probably behind the, it's F. Put a marker there or something there to hold that page, and we'll flip back there in a little bit to take a look at that. But let's talk about the need of a pastor's luncheon. The need for a pastor's luncheon. Often pastors do not understand the Get Acquainted meetings. Now the reason for this is their philosophy. They've not been exposed to this type of a meeting. They've never seen anything like this. We are overcoming that more and more quickly now with the churches that we are planting. But they don't see that they have a responsibility to plant the church. And in essence, they really don't have the responsibility, but we want them involved in it. Many pastors do not have this philosophy of church planting, that churches start churches. They were trained like I was trained, and that is, you're a church planter, go out, plant a church. It's your job, go out, start the church. You know, that's the way they look at it. And we have to overcome those kind of things. So they don't understand this meeting. I've had preachers get involved, and they come and say, oh, wow, you want us to do, oh, yeah, we'll be happy to help. But when they get to the meeting, they say, what do we have to do? You know, I remember we were doing a church plant in Connecticut, and even the reproducing church, the pastor was sort of detached, you know, and I think it was because of his philosophy. He thought, oh yeah, we're the reproducing church, but that just means all we do is send this guy out there. We don't have a lot of work. And when we held the pastor's luncheon there in that community, it helped him to understand as well. Secondly, a second reason we need this luncheon is because pastors often do not carefully read the material. They don't read the material. That we send them. They're busy, just glance at the letters on the church plant. They don't see the importance of the project, so therefore they don't give it the thought that they should give it. And so if we have this luncheon, we can get them in front of us, put some food in front of them and say, look, we need your help. Here's what we want you to do. We'll go over that. Pastors also, a third reason we need for the luncheon to be held is to know that others are involved, that they're not the only one doing this. I don't know whether we have any pictures. Have you seen any pictures come up on the slides? Oh, there may be pictures. I don't know whether I put any in there or not of this pastor's luncheon where I know we've had some of them where we've gotten preachers together. But at this meeting, pastors will meet other pastors that are helping. We may have 6, we may have 10, we may have 15. I didn't get to the pastor's luncheon in Ohio for the church plants in Worcester and Vermilion, but I think they had 21 pastors there at that, which makes a big difference, which is really a big help to get that done when they come. This helps pastors be willing to carry their part of the load because they see other pastors carrying their load. In this luncheon, they begin to work together. And the fourth reason that we want to hold this pastor's luncheon is for pastors need to see how the meetings will be held. And we go through these things step by step with them. It gives them the opportunity to show them what is going to happen. It's easier to show and tell than write a letter to a pastor. So it's more kindergarten type stuff, you know, bring your show and tell. So that's basically the kind of meeting we have with these pastors. And during this luncheon, Yeah, we'll talk about it down there, so we'll talk about it under Roman numeral number 3. Now, who should attend the pastor's luncheon? Who do we want to attend this? Sadly, we sometimes don't get the right people to attend, but who do we want to attend this pastor's luncheon? First of all, the pastor of the reproducing church needs to be there. He needs to be there. Now, the reason for that is this pastor is responsible for planting the church. Okay, he's the pastor. He's planting the church. He ought to be in charge of the meeting. Now, sometimes when I've done these, they say, no, Brother Jessup, you just take it and do it. We want you to do it. And I'll do it. If they want me to do it, I'll do it. But other times, they are willing to take the lead, and we help them with that. We give them agenda. We put all this together. We lead them through it. It's not something they normally do, but it's something we do all the time. You know, I don't know. We didn't have one in Aberdeen, Scotland. I know that. We didn't need to have one there. And there's occasional. I don't think we had one for Maple coming up in the fall. Do we have a? And the reason we don't is because we're dealing with 15 or 20 pastors in Southern Ontario that all have done it so many times. All we have to do is say, look, we're starting a church. Oh, yeah, count us in. I had one pastor up there. We were planting the church in Georgina, the other side of the lake, and which is a long way from Kitchener. And the pastor in Kitchener found out we'd planted the church, and he sent me an email. He said, Brother Jessup, why weren't we informed? Why weren't we told there was a church plant? Amen. And I said, well, Brother Clayton, you know, you're 2 hours away from this, and we just had other churches that were willing to help, and I didn't want to. He said, look, if there's a church plant, we want to be involved. We want to do something. And that's great having a pastor complain because he wasn't told, isn't it? You know? Southern Ontario is just great, man. Those guys know what they're doing up there and are quite involved in the planting of churches. Okay, the second person who should attend is the pastor of the new church. I don't think we've ever asked his wife to come, to this meeting, and I don't think it's necessary, but we do want that pastor to be there. It's going to give him a chance to meet these pastors that he may not know. He'll have an opportunity to give his testimony, share his vision. We like having this meeting in the town where the new church is going to be started, if possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but the reason we like to do that is we like to take them over and show them the building, show them where we're meeting, how we're going to hold the services, how we're going to do all of that, and that helps, makes a difference as well. So, if we can do that, we like doing that. C, we would like to have all the pastors of the churches helping with the church plant, our helping churches, our aunts. Churches are feminine, of course. Our aunts and uncles. We want them coming to help as well to this luncheon. Now, sometimes the pastor will send a staff member. It's not the best. It's not the best. I much prefer to have the pastor there. But sometimes all we can get is a staff member. I'd rather have a staff member there than nobody there. It's not a problem as long as the staff member has the responsibility of leading the church in this. See, in some churches that we use, the pastor will say, okay, I'm turning this over to you and giving you this responsibility. You're in charge of this, and they're able to come to the meeting, coordinate their church, bring their people because the pastor has other responsibilities. I don't have a problem with that at all, as long as the pastor's just not saying, I don't want to be involved in this. Who cares about a church plant? That's not what we want. We also want anyone helping to coordinate the church plant. You want those folks there. Now, this would include a member of our staff. Normally, we have at least one of our staff members that attend these meetings. And it could include staff members from the reproducing pastor that are helping the reproducing pastor. In some places, in some larger churches, it's not often that a larger church plants a church. It's not often that happens. And the reason it's not is because they're too busy. They just have too many things going. There are other times that it has happened. We've helped Lancaster Baptist Church reproduce a church. We helped them reproduce one. Colonial Hills in Indianapolis did a great job in reproducing a church. They're 1,200 people, so that's a pretty large church. Mansfield, what do they run? 500, 600? Oh, really? So, okay. All right, Mansfield Baptist Temple, you know. But normally the churches that really do this are 300 to 400 churches like that. They seem to be better at it, or at least more willing to do it. Maybe they understand a little more, I don't know. But anyway, there are times when a staff member that's helping the reproducing pastor, he will come, the reproducing pastor doesn't come. And as long as that staff member has access to the pastor and has the understanding that he can make decisions in this area for the pastor, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with it. But so what we do is we get these guys together. Sometimes it's a breakfast, sometimes it's a luncheon. I think we normally try to do them on a Tuesday or something. I don't know whether we've really got any particular date, but luncheon seems to be worked better than a breakfast for most of these guys. We cover the cost. Unless the reproducing church says, we're going to do this, our ministry will cover the cost for this church, this luncheon. Now, the reason we do that is because we just see this as vital, and we don't want somebody not coming because, you know, they have to pay for a meal. In Michigan, we had one where we held it at the church, and I think the church put together a dinner there. A lot of times we go to a restaurant and do it that way. We do it, whatever it takes to do, we do. Now, what do we do at the pastor's luncheon? First of all, we set an agenda for the pastor's luncheon. Now, agenda will help you plan the meeting. You don't want to get these things off track. So an agenda will help you stay on track during the meeting. And thirdly, an agenda will help you end the meeting in a reasonable time. If you have an agenda, you tell everybody what you want them to do, you can go through there. Let's go look at an agenda in the back of your workbook. The pastor's luncheon, it is Appendix F. This is the agenda for the North Point Baptist Church and Anchor Baptist Church. Preacher's luncheon held on April the 5th. Brother Foster, where was this luncheon held? Was it held at the church? At the church. Did they provide the dinner? Yes. They did. They provided the dinner. That works really well, you know. Now, in this case, we were doing two at the same time because these church plants were back to back. I mean, one in Worcester, next week in Vermilion. And so they were back to back. And so because they were close, I think they're about an hour apart. And because they were that close, we decided let's just put all this together. All these pastors were working together on these church plants. We just decided to do it all at one time. And it worked rather well to do it this way. And so here's the agenda for that, prayer and eat. So they had prayer, had their lunch first. Following lunch, Pastor Atkins opened it, had a welcome. I'm sure he welcomed everybody there. He introduced Pastor Mick. Now, Pastor Mick was the reproducing pastor for the church plant in Vermilion. And their church is in Sandusky. So the church in Sandusky was reproducing the church in Vermilion. Following that introduction, and I was not there for this luncheon, that's further down here. Then they introduced Pastor Snowd, who was pastoring the church, North Point Baptist Church, and Brother Jameson, who was pastoring the church at Anchor Baptist Church in Vermilion. And then they introduced Brother Foster, who was there representing our ministry. Then they introduced the pastors from the various churches that were at the lunch. Then they introduced the church plant with the dates. So there were two, the one at North Point and then the other at Anchor. So then Brother Mick, and this probably was a little longer because they had three testimonies rather than one here. Brother Mick gives a testimony about what they did, about how God led them to Vermilion. Now, Brother Atkins must have already done that up at the top. Is that correct? And then Brother Snowd gives a testimony about how God took him to Worcester. Then Brother Jameson gives a testimony about how God took him to Vermilion. Now, at this point, it was turned over to Brother Foster. Am I correct about that? And the first thing Brother Foster did was teach on the Jerusalem church and church planting. Now, the reason we did that is because A lot of guys in these meetings had never heard this philosophy. All right? And what are we trying to do? We are putting a biblical basis to how we go about church planning. Now, are you saying, Brother Jessup, that they had a pastor's luncheon in the Jerusalem church? No. You know, I'm not saying that. I do think they ate. You know, they were Baptists. They must have eaten. No, I'm not saying that. Am I saying they set up a John and Romans distribution? No. But we're just taking what we're taking here. We're taking the principles we find from the Jerusalem church. So Brother Foster goes through how the Jerusalem church planted churches using laymen. Now, you would not believe the number of pastors who have said to me, Brother Jessup, I've never seen that before. I had a pastor, James Beller. I was preaching last week in Toledo. And after I did the session on Jerusalem church and church planting, he said, Brother Jessup, I'd never put that together before. He was doing it, using his layman to start churches. But he said, I never really looked at that before. So when you have a pastor's luncheon like this, the first thing you got to do is you got to show those pastors why we are doing what we're doing. And most of the time they look at that and say, whoa, that's good. That's good. So we go through that. The second thing we do is set the schedule for the week of meetings. And I think the next page, yes, go over to Appendix G. This may help us, if we go through this now, this may help us in another session, shorten that session, which would be a good thing. The shorter we get these sessions, the better I'm going to like it. This is the schedule for the meetings. You see the date there? We make one of these up for each church. The name of the church is at the top, the date for the week of meetings. The dates are put in on the side. And then what church is going to help with music for the Sunday, let's just pick a date, June 21st. Monday, June 22nd. Tuesday, June 23rd. Thursday, June 24th. And then who's going to do the music? Who's going to do the ushers? Who's going to do the nursery? Who's going to do refreshments? So these pastors are there. And so what Brother Foster or I will do when we go through this is we say, now look, on Sunday night, Mansfield Baptist Church Temple is going to take the whole service. Now, why do we use the reproducing church on this Sunday? Because they're committed to this. They're committed to it. You say, well, brother, why do you start on Sunday night? Well, the reason we start on Sunday night is because we get more visitors on Sunday night than any other night, because there are people in these communities that are attending churches that have stopped their Sunday night services, and they're saying, we used to go to church on Sunday night. How come we don't have Sunday night church? Well, nobody has Sunday night service anymore, and we're going to towns where nobody does. We come in and have a Sunday night service. We're going to get those people to come to our service that Sunday night because they're not having church in their church. So they say, well, hey, we're not having church. We'll go there, see what's going on. If we get them Sunday night, we might get them back Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night. And we find we get more visitors on Sunday night than the other night of the week. And if we can get them on Sunday night, maybe we can get them back another night. We want to get them back on the last night when the new preacher preaches. So that's why we start on Sunday night. So the reproducing church is committed to that Sunday night. And so then on Monday night, another church may say, maybe it's Calvary in Ashland or whatever, we'll take the music, we'll take the ushers, the nursery that night. We'll bring refreshments. All right? So you go through this schedule with each of them. Now, below this are some suggestions. We'll talk about those when we get to another session, I believe. All right, go back to your agenda. So we set that schedule for the week of meetings. Then we set the schedule for distribution of literature. Now, I don't know if I don't think I have an appendix for a distribution of literature. That would be a good idea to put in there. Mark that down for me, please, so I can get an appendix for distribution of literature. There is a sheet that we use that goes to every church that says, here's what we want you to do when you come to distribute literature. Here's how we want you to dress. Here's where the place will be that we will meet. Here's what we will be expected, and all of that. Here's the distribution center where you can pick up your John and Romans and so on. And then we present the budget for the meetings. as well. It was done for the Worcester project. Then everything was done for the Vermilion project as well under that. Now, when we present the budget, we go through this budget. If you go back a few pages, Appendix C. This is the budget for the Worcester meetings. What we've done is we've taken some of our most recent work and put in here. Here's the budget and how it's laid out. And so we go through this budget. The total budget for Worcester was $7,480. Now, it may be that some of this has already come in. And we've had pastors say, Brother Jessup, we'll take care of the pulpit. You got pulpit costs down there. Maybe there's none on this particular one. Yeah, $300. We'll take care of that. Somebody else will say, Brother Jessup, we've got some money. We'll take care of those mobile signs. Okay, great. Well, if we've got some money set aside already for mobile signs, we'll put that somewhere else. You see? Or somebody else may say, look, God's blessed our church and our missions program. We'll put $1,000 in John Romans. I've been in meetings where all this money's been raised. You leave that meeting and they say, yeah. Now, what do? Follow up with the letter. Follow up with the letter. Thank you for committing $300 for the pulpit. You can bring that to the Get Acquainted meetings and present it at that time. I mean, that's making them be committed. All right. Okay.
Question?
Yes, question.
How come the travel expenses you have all as zeros?
All right, that's a good question. On the budget, you have travel expense for the speaker, accommodation, meals, honorarium, and so on. Because normally if we're doing that, we don't charge. We do not include any of our personal expenses. That comes out of our seed bank. We want to get our ministry where it doesn't come out of our seed bank, where it comes out of our work fund. But right now we don't have that. But regardless of that, we're using seed bank funds, which is seed bank is a one-time offering that we take in October, November. It's called the Reaping the Harvest offering. I have some copies of last year's. I think they're in my briefcase. We could get some of those. That offering's taken one time a year. We try to put, I think this year's offering was around $20,000. And what that does is it covers all the expenses we cover for the new church plants. And when we go in for the pastor's luncheon, our expenses we cover. We go in for the Get Acquainted meetings, we cover that. We go in to initially start up the church plant, we cover those expenses. We do not charge churches for starting churches. We cover our expenses. And God's been good to us. Oh man, has God been good. I don't know how we've done it. I really don't know how. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we've never missed a payment on anything that we've done. God's been good. We've had people, there are people I don't even know that have put $5,000 in the seed bank. There's a guy in Tennessee, in Sparta, Tennessee. I've never met the guy. I've written him a couple times. I never hear from him. All of a sudden we'll get a check for $5,000 for our ministry. I don't even know how he knows me. I was out in Edmonton, Alberta. This guy called me on the phone. He'd gotten something from somebody who was in another church, and he said, you don't know me, I don't know you, but he said, I got some stuff on your ministry. I'd like to talk to you about giving some money to your ministry. I said, well, I thought he wanted something. So I said, well, I talked to him, and finally I said, well, look, I really don't want you to contribute to our ministry if you're taken from the church. Oh, no, I'm not. And I said, well, I'd like your address. He said, no, I'm just want to give you some money. I said, well, look, if you're not willing to give me your address where I can write you, I think you need to be kept informed of what we're doing if you're investing your money in our ministry. He said, oh, well, okay, sure, I'll give it to you. So he gave me the address. Every now and then we get $1,000, $1,500 from this guy. Maybe it's an angel unawares. I don't know. I don't know whether, yes. All right. Oh, okay, great. Brother Beck says, send it to me. Send it to me. Yeah. Oh, it's you. It's you. Oh, okay, that's you. Great. Yeah, right. Anyway, does that help you understand that question there? It was under the travel expense. We don't charge for that. Okay. All right. So you see the budget, we go over that budget, we try to raise that money. Now, we may have covered something that's, yeah, we did a little bit here, but let's go back to our notes and look at our notes. B, have a presentation folder prepared for each pastor. Again, this would be nice to have in the appendix. If I put everything in the appendix that we do on a church plant, we'd have a 200-page workbook. It'd be huge. It's on the CD, but we're not going to put all that in here. We just can't do it. We just can't do it. I'm not going to. It would put the price up of this. Plus, all you would have is something on paper, whereas on the CD you have something you can reproduce on the CD because it's in Word format, and will eventually be in Pages format, which is a Mac format. All right, just for those so you understand. In this presentation folder. It'd be great if we had some of these, but you should have the information on the dates of the meeting, information on the timeline of the meeting, information on the schedule for the services, information on the responsibilities of the helping churches. And that's the material we looked at under Appendix G. That's that information that it's talking about there. Information on the budget for the church plant, which is Appendix E? No. C. Appendix C. And you should have information on the directions to the building for the service. You should have something in there that they can post on at their church for this meeting. So what we try to do is we try to put all this together to make it easy for these churches to do this. Now, all this has been trial and error. It's been stuff we've learned, because we had some meetings and somebody said, we didn't know how to get there. Well, let's put a map. I mean, you would think they could figure it out. I don't know what the deal is, but hey, if we can make it easy for them, we try to do that. So we put that in there for them. All right, have the reproducing pastor chair the meeting. We looked at that when we looked at the agenda in the back. It's great if he can chair the meeting because he's leading the project. This is his responsibility. And he should also chair the meeting so that other pastors know that he's in charge, that he's behind this project. It bothers me when some reproducing pastors say, well, I'm not coming to the meeting. I really would like for them to be there. All right, we've already looked at the agenda in the back, introduce everyone involved in the project. Some pastors may not know everybody there. They may not know some pastors, and they can meet. Something should be said about their qualifications, background, what they're doing. The reproducing pastor, the new pastor, he should get up and give a testimony. I think that's probably mentioned here as well. And then we should have each pastor introduce himself. They may not have met before. And it also helps each pastor feel that he is vital to the church planting project. And he is. It is vital to have these pastors be at this meeting, get involved, and work together. Years ago, 1993, 1994, my wife and I started this when we went to Winnipeg, starting churches out of our church. And other churches began to see what we were doing. We in Canada, the preachers are pretty close to one another. And yet in Southern Ontario, back in the early 90s, there were 3 or 4 distinct fellowships. Guys that wouldn't associate with one another. I could tell you who they are. I won't, but I could. And so these preachers, they had their little group and their little camp. These preachers had their little group and their little camp. And these preachers had their little group and their little camp. And they didn't get along with these guys. And these guys didn't get along with these guys. And these guys were mad at these guys. It was just, that's the way it was across Canada. It's the way it was out in Alberta. Well, in 93, when we resigned the church and started this ministry, some of these churches in Southern Ontario decided they were going to plant churches, and they wanted us to help them. So we began helping them plant churches. Well, I just started working with all these guys and bringing them together for church planting. And I had people in this group that I helped, and I had people in this group that I helped, and I had people in this group that I helped. Well, when I helped this guy reproduce a church, I called pastors from this group and said, look, we're reproducing a church. We want you to get involved. And I called folks over here, look, we want you to get involved. I don't remember the year, maybe 98, 99, something like that, maybe 2000. I don't know how long we've been doing it. The preachers in Canada decided to have a national meeting. And the last Monday and Tuesday of September, the preachers in Canada get together somewhere in Canada. We could have 70, 80, 90 preachers at that meeting. I remember the first one we held. It was at Faithway Baptist Church in Ajax. They introduced about 70 or 80 preachers in that meeting, and there were 14 fellas in that meeting that would help start churches. 4. They were at that meeting. And somebody said to me, he said, Brother Jessup, do you realize that your ministry is really what put this together? Because before, these pastors didn't get along with each other, but when they got together for church planting, they put their differences aside and worked together for church planting. We don't have a national fellowship. We don't have a fellowship meeting. All we do is we have a meeting once a year where all the preachers get together, and at that meeting somebody says, hey, y'all come to my place next year. And so everybody goes to his church, and he invites the speakers, and he plans the meeting. And at that meeting, somebody says, hey, let's go out west this year. Y'all come out west. Come out to our place. And the next year we go out west. And this year we're going to Quebec. We've been in Newfoundland, been in Manitoba. And preachers just a couple of days a year all get together and preach and have a good time. Nobody stands up and says, let's have a business meeting. There isn't any business meeting. The only thing that brings together is church planting. And that's why they plant churches. And I think the reason is because they realize they're vital. They're vital to this thing. And we want them to understand that. Also, we've talked about this already in the agenda. F, teach on the philosophy of churches planting churches. Now, on our website, I'm sorry, I should have these with me. I have been so busy, I have not been able to put these CDs together. Brother Moore, when you get home, your girls are going to do this for me. We're going to put together the message. I now have it on DVD. I just got it from Sunday. Have now a DVD copy of this. Maybe we'll make some of those available from Delaware. Jerusalem Church and Church Planting. We have it on CD, and you ought to take that, listen to it, so that if you're going to do this, you can talk to your church or talk to your pastor and say, look, churches start churches. Churches start churches. Churches start. Not everybody's going to buy into it. They just don't, because authority, to some degree, sometimes people want authority to be somewhere else other than the local church. You know, I believe the local church starts churches. I believe the church pastor ought to be in charge of the church plant. I don't call anybody else. When I'm dealing with a pastor, I call his pastor. I deal with the pastor. Nobody else. There's no reason to call anybody else. Churches start churches. So, but you've got to understand the philosophy. The pastors have to see the biblical reasons for churches planting churches, and they also have to see the practical reasons for planting the church in this manner. And we've talked about those practical things. It is practical to do it this way. This is a good thing. Now, and I know there are those who say, well, you're just tooting your own horn. Well, whatever. Okay, go over the schedule for the Get Acquainted meetings. We looked at that schedule in the back. This will help pastors determine what day of the week they want to help. Have them get their calendar out. Okay, here's your calendar. You got your Palm or iPhone or a Franklin Covey, or is that called Daytimer, whatever? You've got that out there, and these are the dates. What day will you help us? When will you come? What about handing out the John Romans? We go over those things as well. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. Pastors should understand what's required of them during the service. Now, number 3, it's good to have, and the word is overhead, I think it ought to be PowerPoint. Not too many people use overheads anymore. These notes were probably written back when we had to use overheads when I first wrote them. But I think PowerPoint's a better thing to put there. It would be great if the new pastor has a video presentation that he could show. Show that to these pastors. Maybe some have seen it, maybe they haven't. Or hand out sheets with the information on it. Get it into their hands. If you could put a PowerPoint up there with a calendar on it and put in the information, boy, that'd be great. And then if you could do that, and I haven't seen this done, I don't think we've ever done it this way. Brother Foster, you might know more about this than I. But if you can put that in with the computer and then send it to the printer and have it printed off and back in their hands, we could have done that down at Liberty, for example, where we held our meeting last week. We could work on our computer and send it wirelessly to their printer and have it printed in their hands just in a minute. That'd be a great thing to do, and we probably need to improve on some of these things in these areas. What we do. All right. Next, go over a budget for the GAM, for the Get Acquainted meetings. Go over the budget. A budget should be prepared for this meeting. It should be in the hands of everybody that's there. It should include all the money that's already come in for the church plant. It should include items that are not already paid for. Okay, so get this together. You saw the budget that we had in the back. And try to get the pastors to bring an offering. Now, it's not so much, well, it is. You need the money. We need the money. But it's not just that. There is something about credibility when a pastor stands up and says, look, I've got a check for $1,500 for this church. The visitors say, whoa, this guy must be pretty important. There's something about that credibility factor that really helps us there as well. All right, H, go over the distribution of literature. How are you going to distribute the literature? Pastors should be informed about this literature distribution and how their church family can help. How can they help us in this distribution of literature? Now, sometimes we do the John and Romans distribution through the mail or through newspaper or whatever. That should not eliminate door-to-door work. We did a church plant in Edinburgh, Indiana, and they chose to do it all by hand. I'll tell you what, if I'd have been over there and looked at that thing, I'd have said, you can't do it this way. Here's what happens sometimes. Pastors, especially new pastors who are going to pastors, oh, this church said they're coming, they're going to bring 30 people. This church said they're coming, they're going to bring 40 people, and we could do this. And then when that church shows up, they actually only brought 5. And therefore, they don't get done. The work doesn't get done. I don't know, Brother Roland, whether that happened down in your church plant or not down there, but if we can get in those churches and get the people excited, that's one thing. But when a pastor comes to a luncheon like this and says, oh, we'll bring 30 people, he goes back to his church and says, oh, we're going to go down yonder. There's going to start a new church down yonder. We need some folks to help us hand out some things. Y'all want to come or not? Yeah, it's going to be next Saturday. Well, we got a picnic Saturday, don't we? Oh, let's see now. Isn't that ball game on Saturday too? Well, I'm sure they'll be okay. I'm sorry, but that's just the way preachers are. And it doesn't get done. And so then the pastor's down there, and he said, we didn't get this done. I remember being down there just before the meeting. Sonny, you were with me on that. And Edinburgh is a lot like some other communities here in the Midwest. Here's the town, but all these people come to this town to shop. And so it was easy to hit the town. But all these farming roads where people live that are farmers, and by the way, those kind of people you want to hit. You know why? Because they're different than town people. They've got an understanding of what God can do because they're farmers. And you want to hit those. And they didn't get those hit. And I remember that Saturday I worked, good night. I just took my car by myself. Did you go with me? I think you went with me part of the day. Part of the day I was by myself. And I was just driving down roads, sticking these things as close as I could to their mailbox. And you can't put them in the mailbox in the U.S., but I mean, I was just down one street road after another, just mile after mile after mile after mile after mile, because there was, here's a farm, down the road's a farm, down the road's a farm, down the road's a farm. But had they distributed those through the newspaper, it would have been done. But they didn't, and they didn't get done. All right, so if you use a newspaper distribution, then you can take these distribution Saturdays when a church says they're going to bring 30 and only bring 5. They can do something, but it's all gravy. It just helps. The real thing has already been done. But they get out there and they hit doors, and that's wonderful, and talk to people. That's great. But you can say in the back of your mind, the real work has already been done. This is just extra. And that's what you want to do here. All right? All right. Leave time for questions. Pastors will have questions following the meeting. Anytime you do something like this, their pastors are going to shake their head, scratch their head and say, wait, you mean to tell me in this church plant, now explain this thing about the Jerusalem church, how they did it. I don't know. But most of the guys have not heard it. I think I can go to my dying day, which some hope is soon. But I think I could go to my dying day and preach on this and still have preachers say to me, I never heard that before. Maybe when we get the book done next year, Lord willing, it'll be done next year. That will help. We'll see. Pastors will also have suggestions to help with the church plant. And so you want a period of time there. So you want to leave some time for that. And pastors will use this time to encourage the new pastor and other pastors, sometimes by saying, hey, look, we'll give this or whatever. They should have a complete understanding of the church plant. All right? Now, this meeting will bring pastors together in unity for the planting of the church. And that's what we need. We need unity here in this. They will work hard for something they understand. And that's what this meeting is all about, is getting them to understand. And it gives opportunities for the new pastor to get some personal support from churches he may not have been in before. He may not have been in those churches, not had that opportunity to do that.